In the last 12 months alone, nearly 73,000 New Zealand citizens have left the country. Almost 40% of those leaving are between the ages of 18 and 30. This is not a random slice of the population. This is the generation that should be entering the workforce, building careers, starting businesses, and shaping the country's future. So what happens when a small, wealthy, and highly developed country starts losing the very group meant to carry it forward? Migration is not new. Every advanced economy experiences some level of youth mobility. Young people move, explore and test opportunities elsewhere. That part is normal. What makes New Zealand different is the scale, the timing and the direction of that movement. The outflow is large, it is concentrated in early career years, and it flows steadily toward a much larger neighbouring economy. This is not a story about crisis headlines or sudden collapse, it's a story about structure, incentives and long-term consequences. Because today we're not just asking why young New Zealanders are leaving, we're asking something far more important. Why are so many of them not coming back? Over the past year, New Zealand recorded the highest number of citizen departures in its history. Roughly 70,000 New Zealand citizens left the country in a single 12-month period. That number alone sounds alarming, but numbers without context are misleading. New Zealand still shows positive net migration, meaning more people arrive than leave overall. On paper, the population grows, but not all population growth is equal when it comes to economics. This is where an important distinction matters. Net migration counts everyone, citizens leaving, citizens returning, and new migrants arriving. It tells us whether the population is growing or shrinking. But the gross outflow of citizens tells a different story. It focuses only on New Zealanders who leave. These are people educated in the country, raised in its institutions, and already integrated into its labour market. When they leave, their replacement is not immediate and often not equal. Now look at the age profile. Nearly 40% of departing citizens are between 18 and 30 years old, with a median age of about 29. This detail matters more than the headline numbers. These are not retirees. These are not people at the end of their careers. These are people just after education, just after training, at the point where economic contribution accelerates and skills start to compound. Think of it in this way. In your early 20s, you are learning how work actually functions. By your late 20s, you stop asking basic questions and start solving problems on your own. You become faster, more confident, and more useful. All of the time and resources used to train you are steadily recouped. If you leave before this stage fully plays out, the economy may not feel the immediate loss today, but it loses what you would have become over the next 10 or 15 years, your most productive, seasoned labour. New Zealand is small, geographically isolated, and closely linked to a much larger economy nearby. When young people leave Germany or France, many stay within the same economic system. When young New Zealanders leave, they usually exit the domestic economy entirely. This creates an imbalance. In larger countries, youth mobility is spread across regions. In New Zealand, it concentrates outward. A small country losing a large share of its early career population feels the impact faster. Productivity growth slows. Skill pipelines thin out. Future leadership pools shrink. None of this shows up immediately in population statistics, but it shows up later in wages, innovation, and fiscal pressure. But if so many young New Zealanders are leaving, where exactly are they going? When we look at where young New Zealanders go after they leave, one number stands out very clearly. Around 60% of them move to Australia. Not Europe, not the United States, not Asia. New Zealanders are not scattering across the globe. They are moving to the closest large option available. The reason starts with size. Australia has a much bigger economy. To start, it has about 5 times the population of New Zealand. A bigger population supports more businesses, more offices, more hospitals, more construction sites, and more services. All of those create jobs. And besides being a means of support, jobs are also options. And when you are young, options matter. The impression that you can enter any number of fields or have endless professional opportunities feels important, even if you end up doing the same job you likely would have otherwise. Of course, there are also more practical benefits to entering a larger economy. If one role does not fit, there is another nearby. If a company downsizes, there are others hiring. That flexibility is very powerful for people at the start of their careers. Income also plays a role. On average, wages in Australia are higher than in New Zealand. This shows up clearly in statistics, but it also shows up in everyday life. A higher weekly paycheck means rent takes a smaller share of income. Groceries feel less tight. Savings become possible sooner. For someone in their 20s, this difference is felt every week. But here is the key point many people miss. It's not just about higher pay, it's about what economists call the wages to opportunity ratio. That sounds complicated, but it is not. It simply means this: how much you earn compared to how many doors are open to you next. A job that pays a bit more but leads nowhere can feel worse than a job that pays slightly less but opens opportunities for advancement. What we are really seeing is migration inside one connected system. Education standards are similar. Work culture is familiar. Legal movement is relatively easy. Australia has more industries that absorb young workers in large numbers. Healthcare systems are always hiring. Construction runs constantly in growing cities. Mining and resources offer high demand in certain regions. Service industries grow alongside dense urban areas. These sectors create entry points for people with different skills, not just top graduates. Naturally, workers are shifting to where the system can use them more effectively. Over time, something else starts to happen. Economists call it a centre of gravity. When friends move, social life shifts. When partners find work, families settle. When careers grow, professional networks deepen. Over time, staying becomes easy and returning becomes costly, not just financially, but socially and professionally. So Australia does not win because it is perfect. It wins because it is bigger, more flexible, and better at catching young ambition when it's just getting started. But Australia is only part of the story. The more uncomfortable question is why so many young people feel pushed to look elsewhere in the first place. Now let's turn back to New Zealand and look at what pushes young people out. Start with the job market. Official unemployment sits around 5.2 to 5.3%. On paper, that does not look extreme. Many countries operate with higher numbers, but averages hide where the pressure actually sits. The increase lands hardest on young workers. When companies slow hiring, they protect experience first. Graduates and early career workers wait longer. There is also another issue that matters even more, called underemployment. This means people have skills, education, or experience, but their jobs do not fully use them. Imagine training for years, then working fewer hours than you want, or in a role far below your level. Income stays low. For many young people, this feels like being stuck at the starting line. Economic cycles always recover eventually. When growth returns, hiring resumes. The pattern stays consistent across countries. Older and more experienced workers recover first. Young workers recover last. A slow start shapes an entire career. One lost year early can echo for many years after. Now zoom out to the wider economy. Over the past year, GDP fell roughly 1.1% before rebounding in the third quarter. That signals reduced production and weaker demand. Even when wages rise on paper, real life tells a different story. Wages have increased, but the cost of living have risen faster for many essentials. Rent, food and transport absorb a larger share of income. When pay rises barely keep pace, progress feels frozen. Saving becomes difficult. Planning becomes harder. For someone starting adult life, that lack of momentum weighs heavily. Housing adds another layer of pressure. In New Zealand, the price-to-income ratio sits around 7 times income. That means the average home costs about 7 years of total earnings before tax. Even with prices stabilising, the entry barrier remains high. Deposits stay large. Lending rules stay tight. The door looks closed from the outside. Stability in prices help people who already own homes. For those trying to enter, the challenge stays the same. Without family support or rapid income growth, buying feels distant. Renting longer becomes the default path. That changes how people think about their future in a place. When we put all of this together, a clear picture forms. The issue for young New Zealanders centres on more than pay. The deeper problem is the absence of a clear path forward. And that brings us to the next question. If pressure pushes people out during hard times, why do so many stay away even when the conditions begin to improve? Let's talk about ambition. Not money, ambition. These two often get mixed together, but they are very different things. Money answers the question, can I pay my bills? Ambition answers a different one. Where can this take me in 10 or 20 years? For many young people in New Zealand, that second question becomes harder to answer over time. New Zealand runs a small economy. Small economies work very well for stability, quality of life, and balance. They struggle with something else: depth. Every career has a ladder. Early jobs sit at the bottom, senior roles sit near the top. In a small economy, that ladder has fewer steps. Once someone reaches the middle, the next step often fails to materialise. Think about highly specialised careers. Research provides a clear example. A country with 5 million people supports a limited number of advanced research centres. That creates a narrow funnel. Many students train for the same few roles. Only a small number move forward. Larger economies support entire ecosystems of labs, funding bodies and institutions, which creates more room to grow. The same logic applies to technology. Early-stage tech jobs exist in New Zealand. Startup culture exists. What becomes rare are large-scale teams working on global products with layers of leadership above them. A young engineer with long-term goals eventually looks for environments where teams scale upward rather than sideways. Creative industries follow a similar pattern. Design, film, media, and digital production all exist locally. High-level creative direction, international distribution, and global decision-making usually sits elsewhere. Ambitious creatives follow gravity. Bigger markets support bigger platforms. Advanced management works the same way. Entry and mid-level management roles appear in most economies. Strategic leadership roles cluster in regional or global hubs where decisions affect millions of people and large pools of capital. Ambitious managers search for complexity, scale, and responsibility. Those traits concentrate in larger systems. This creates what economists call an ambition mismatch. Young people build skills, expectations, and long-term plans that require vertical movement. The local system offers horizontal movement instead. Jobs exist, but careers stall earlier than expected. Other small countries face similar pressures. Many solve this by hosting a regional hub within their borders. Financial centres, research capitals, or industrial clusters absorb ambition and keep talent circulating at home. New Zealand lacks such a hub. Geography and scale push advanced roles offshore, and once that movement begins, something important changes. At the start, leaving often feels temporary. Many young people frame it as a phase. A few years abroad, some experience, better pay, then return home. This idea has a name that sounds harmless: the overseas experience. For a long time that story made sense. The problem is that system around it has changed. When people arrive in a larger economy, they do not land in isolation. They enter networks, they meet co-workers, they form friendships, some meet partners. Careers begin to grow in ways that connect them to specific places. Think about how social life works. At first, a person keeps close contact with home. Calls are frequent. Visits are planned. Gradually, daily life fills in the gaps. New routines form. Weekends get busy. Friend groups stabilize. A relationship becomes serious. Later, children enter the picture. At that point, life no longer sits lightly in one place. This is what economists call a social lock-in. It doesn't feel like a lock, it feels like normal life. But it raises the cost of moving back. Leaving no longer means just changing a job. It means asking a partner to give up their work. It means pulling children out of schools. It means breaking routines that took years to build. Alongside this, a financial lock-in develops. Early in a career, moving back and forth stays relatively easy. Later on, the numbers begin to matter more. A return often brings a lower salary than the one earned abroad. This is not about comparing lifestyles or judging choices. It is about incentives. People compare options. They look at what they give up and what they gain. Over time, the math changes. Staying becomes the safer choice, even if emotional ties remain strong. This is where the old overseas experience story breaks down. In the past, people left when going abroad offered adventure, not structure. They returned because home still offered similar opportunities on a smaller scale. Today, the balance looks different. As a result, the return option weakens. Going back does not feel like stepping into the same race, it feels like restarting from a slower lane. Over time, distance becomes normal. Visits replace residence. Identity stretches across borders. What once felt temporary hardens into a permanence, sometimes without a singular, clear decision ever being made. This explains why improving conditions at home does not immediately reverse the flow. Even when economies recover, people do not move in reverse as quickly as they left. Lock-in works slowly, but it works consistently. So what can we conclude from all of this? What we are looking at is not a sudden collapse. There are no empty cities, no mass panic, no overnight breakdown of the system. New Zealand is still functioning, still attractive, still stable in many ways. But underneath that surface, something slow but momentous is happening. This is a quiet, long-term outflow. It does not show up dramatically in any single month. It shows up over the years. It shows up when we see the median age of those leaving is around the late 20s. It shows up when people leave before they reach their most productive years, before they move into senior roles, before they start building companies, research teams, or institutions at home. This matters because economies are not powered only by numbers. They are powered by momentum. Young people carry future productivity, future tax bases, future innovation, and future leadership. When that group slowly relocates, the impact is delayed but inexorable. But it is also important to stay grounded. Migration itself is not new. Mobility is normal in a global economy. Ideas, capital and talent have always moved towards places where they are used most efficiently. That process does not make New Zealand broken, it simply exposes the limits of its current structure. The key issue is alignment. If a country trains ambitious, highly educated young people but cannot offer enough vertical growth afterwards, movement becomes rational. If career ladders flatten too early, people look for taller ones elsewhere. Over that time, that behaviour becomes predictable. This is why the situation does not correct itself automatically. Waiting for better cycles or short-term improvements does not address the core mechanics. As long as the structure stays the same, incentives stay the same, and when incentives stay the same, behaviour follows. The warning here is quiet, not dramatic. If nothing changes structurally, returns will remain slow and selective. Emotional ties alone will not reverse economic gravity. Families, careers and lives settle where systems reward long-term effort. At the same time, this story is not finished. Small economies can adapt. They can deepen their career ladders. They can build hubs, clusters and paths that keep ambition circulating at home. But that requires deliberate change, not nostalgia. So the real question is not whether people love New Zealand. Many clearly do. The real question is whether the system they grow into can evolve with their expectations. And in a world where capital, ideas and people constantly move toward higher productivity, one question remains open for every small economy watching this unfold. Can it hold onto its young without changing from the ground up?